You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
The Four Nations. I want to call it Cup. It's not. It's the Four Nations Face-Off. The rosters are out. I'm Dan. I'm here with Pierre, Julie-Stewart, Binks. And guys, you know, I always had a problem with this Four Nations Face-Off. I'm like, this is dumb. It's idiotic. But I saw the rosters and I'm like, I'm kind of excited, Binksy. I'm kind of excited now.
Dude, I completely feel the same way. Seeing some of those players going to be playing with each other, like Matthews and Hughes and Marner and Point and everyone, McDavid, and it's like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen this in so long. We haven't gotten to see NHL players playing at this international level since 2016, which feels like a really long time ago, I realize. And so, yeah, I'm super jazzed to see this. It's going to be great.
Pierre, McDavid, McKinnon,
Crosby's influence on Nathan McKinnon. I'll take you to a date after the draft that Nathan McKinnon went first overall, just to show you the influence Crosby has. As soon as the next day happened, they were running sand dunes in L.A. You know, usually guys get drafted first overall and they go out and have a good time. These guys didn't. Like, they were out running sand dunes in California. I can't wait to see the influence that Sid has on this team. John Cooper knows most of this team extremely well for Team Canada. You know, he's got his own players on there, and Hagel and Cirelli and Point. I mean, there's a lot going on here with this Canadian team. I think of all the teams that have been built, the sense of familiarity on Team Canada that separates them from the other rosters that have been built.
You mentioned a good point. And a lot of these guys and a lot of their coaches, a lot of their teammates, they're going to see their star players going onto these rosters, and they're essentially entering a lab in which they will be saying, okay, I'm going to take some of that from his game. Oh, he does that this way. This is what his pregame's like. They're just going to be sponges in there.
Yeah, you would hope that would be the case, especially when a lot of people consider this to be a dress rehearsal for 2026 in Italy for the Olympics. And I'm really happy this is happening, spirit of cooperation with all the hockey associations, but also between the NHLPA and the NHL, because I do think it'll set up for a spectacular Olympics in 2026, Julie.
Yeah, and I think that it's fascinating. We mentioned John Cooper, like he was on TV last night talking about the process, and that it's almost like because there's no room for error, each game is almost like a game 7. So as a coach, like how do you possibly approach that when you're also coaching in the NHL at the same time?
No, it's such a good question, but I think that's why I brought up Sidney Crosby first. If you think about it, go back to he's the youngest Canadian to ever score a goal at the World Junior. That happened in 2004 in Helsinki, Finland. He was 16 years of age. You go look at the golden goal in 2010 in Vancouver when he's screaming, Iggy, Iggy, Iggy. I was down there between the benches. There are 19,000 people in the building. It's going bedlam crazy. I don't know how Jerome heard him, but I heard Sid screaming it. And then you think about 2014 and that great team in Sochi that Canada had, and they just shut everybody down. For the new breed, and Dan brought it up, Julie, which I think is great. You think about Nathan McKinnon. You think about all the young guys, Sammy Bennett. You think about Travis Konechny, Sammy Reinhart. But the number one guy, who is it? It's the guy freaking McJesus. He's so good. You know, and you think about Connor McDavid and how good he's never played with these guys. He never has. And I can't wait to see that. I just can't wait to see it.
And then they hope for lightning in a bottle and have like a Canada Cup moment.
Oh, I don't think that'll be far to be hard pressed to have that. I think it's very true. You know, the one thing I say is the underrated part of this team is their defense. It's good, it's big, it's mobile. The question mark, and the only one, and I think we all can agree, how good is the goaltending? Will it hold up? We know that Binnington and Hill have won Stanley Cups. I don't know if Sam Montembeault will even have a chance to play in this event because you got to hit the ground running, like you both said, Dan and Julie. But the only question mark I think most people would have is how good's the goaltending?
Yeah, I think that's probably when you look at that and then compare it to the USA, seems to be a huge discrepancy. And now to turn the page to the country that I'm pledging allegiance to tomorrow morning, which is a real great, weird time to be doing it because it's like they release the rosters for Team Canada. I'm getting all excited, and then they release them for USA, and I'm like taking my oath tomorrow. So I'm like, I'm gonna just wear a split jersey for this tournament, and then as I said, Sweden, Finland, they can go on the back or whatever like that. So for USA though, they look super stacked. Like when you go from goaltending out, we go back end out. And we see championship teams, they seem to have the strongest in the back end out. Could you say that they probably are the deepest?
Probably. One of the cool parts of this story that I think is Connor Hellebuck played at University of Massachusetts at Lowell. Jake Ottinger played at Boston University. Jeremy Swayman played at the University of Maine. I don't think we've ever seen this before. All three of their goalies played in the same college league at Hockey East. That's an amazing thing to start with. And then you look at all the names on there, and I think their defense is young. They don't have a lot of international experience at the best on best. They have a lot of World Junior experience. And that's why I'm a little surprised they left John Carlson off the roster. I was really surprised that John didn't find a way on there. He was part of the golden goal in 2011 in Saskatoon. He scored again in a World Junior, played in the 2014 Olympics, played in the 2017 World Championships, played in the 2018 Stanley Cup, and was a huge part of them winning. I was surprised. Of all the omissions, that's the one that surprised me, John Carlson not being on Team USA.
And I was surprised by no Keller, no Clayton Keller.
Yeah, and I think they came down to, okay, how many small guys do we want to have on this team? And where does Clayton Keller fit in? I personally am a fan. I think he's a really good player. And he's represented the United States unbelievably well internationally in a lot of different events. But I think they decided, you know what, we're playing on small ice. We want to have a smash mouth component. So is Vinny Trocheck a better face-off player than Clayton Keller? The answer is yes. He's 14th in the league on face-off percentage right now. Is Dylan Larkin a better player in face-off situations than Clayton Keller? The answer is yes. He's 5th in the league right now in face-off percentages. So I think you understand kind of their team-building mechanism, and I think that's probably why Clayton's on the outside looking in right now.
Okay, so just to stick kind of with that, in terms of guys that are on the team that maybe are a bit surprising, you mentioned Trocheck. He is face-off specialist extraordinaire. But, I was surprised to see Chris Kreider on there.
They want to jam the net on the power play, so you can see what they're going to have. They're going to have a shooting power play, whether it's going to be Adam Fox up high setting it up, or whether it's going to be Quinn Hughes setting it up top, or McAvoy. And I can tell you this, the most underrated shooter in this tournament, unless you watch the Columbus Blue Jackets play all the time, the most underrated shooter in this tournament is Zach Werenski. So what do you want when you have a shooting power play? You need to have a slot area presence to take away the goalie's vision. I don't think there's a better player in the league at doing that than Chris Kreider. And I think they see that as being an important part of this thing. And again, lots of international experience. He was on that team with John Carlson. I just talked about that one goal in 2010 in Saskatoon. And so, again, it starts to pile up. But I think that's probably why, Julie, more than anything else, they see him as being that power play specialist that's going to help them.
How would the omissions have been handled? Would calls have been made to these guys saying, hey, you're on our radar, don't take offense to this, you're in the plans next time around?
You know what? I think it's like I said before, I think Billy Guerin is going to be the GM going into Italy as well for the 2026 Olympics for Team USA. I do think calls were made. I think things were handled probably in a real wise way. They don't want to alienate anybody in the process because you never know. Clayton Keller could go on and score 40 goals this year, and all of a sudden he beats out Vinny Trocheck, or he beats out JT Miller, or he beats out Brady Tkachuk. You never know. So I think that's what's going to be interesting. I do think probably there was some pretty good fence mending that went on when they decided to choose the roster. I talked to the father of a player who's on the team, and he said he thought it was handled really well on the USA side of things. I have not talked to anybody on the Canadian roster.
So for Canada and USA and all these different countries, some of these guys that have been omitted, quote unquote, could technically be brought into the tournament if there's an injury ahead of February 12th, right?
Again, Julie, I got to commend you on that, because I'll go back to the 2002 Olympics. People forget this. Dano, you were just starting, I think, at TSN there in 2002, or pretty close to it. Yep. And we were in Calgary, And what I remember the most being with Bob McKenzie and Gordon Miller, we're about to do a hit. And this pickup truck came into the parking lot of Father David Bauer Arena, and we're like, what's that? That's a player. He's a little late. It was Jerome McGinley. And the reason why Jerome was there was an injury to a player, and I forget who the player was. It was hurt. And Jerome was just supposed to come down and fill out the lines. Well, Jerome played so well, he was a big part of that team. And eventually, if you look at it, 0-2 wins, obviously they win gold, which was a huge reprieve from what happened in 98, the disaster in Nagano. And then you'll see Jerome along the way, and eventually the biggest play, arguably, on Canadian soil in a long time, the assist to Sidney on the 2010 golden goal as called by my partner at the time, Chris Cuthbert. Pretty amazing, pretty amazing. So that just to Julie's point. You never know. A guy could get hurt. Somebody may come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, boom. Like, people are mad. Why isn't Connor Bedard on the roster? Well, I can tell you why Connor Bedard's not on the roster.
Yeah.
He hasn't played well defensively. And they don't want to have anybody, because it's such a fast tournament, they don't want to have anybody that can't do everything.
That's a pretty good player to have in the same city that you guys are practicing, Jerome McGinley. And now I'm envisioning the highlight reel they're going to show these guys to give them pride in their country, and Jerome McGinley and Sidney Crosby. Sidney's going to be sitting right there watching the golden goal with his new teammates for the Four Nations Cup, and these guys are going to be ready to go through the boards for their country.
Yes.
But that's so well said as well, Dan. And, I had the privilege of calling a lot of those games since 2002. And the one thing that stands out about the 0-2 is a Lemieux play through his legs to Paul Correa. And I guarantee if they're doing a pump-up tape, and I'm sure they will, that will be part of Canadian lore. It has to be. It's one of the highlight reel plays of all time. It's just spectacular.
With Bob Cole on the call.
Yeah, phenomenal. It's great. And there's so many good ones from Shea Weber shooting the puck through the net in Vancouver. People forget about that. I mean, I was doing that game, and I'm like, where'd the puck go? And it went right through the net. So there's so many. Canada's in a pretty good position in terms of building a pump-up tape. They really are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be so badass for Sidney Crosby to be sitting there watching the golden goal with all these young guys being like, hey, remember? Like, I shaped your entire life basically going forward. Okay, so I want to get into some of like the players' mindset mentality. You're named to the team, but it's only, December 5th today?
Away. You're 2 months away.
So how much of in what way do players think about that and think about maybe staying healthy? Is it like, oh, great, I've got it, I won't think about it until like the week before, or does it sort of permeate throughout?
I think they'll start sending players, how they want to play intel pretty soon, if they haven't already. But I think most teams, and this is a real, outside of Seth Jarvis, if you look at most of the players on this roster, they're very experienced guys. They've been around. So they're either in the Stanley Cup final or they've played in huge international events. I don't think the Canadian roster will have a problem with that, and they're not going to worry about the event today. I think they'll worry about the event, 5 days out. But I think most of them are focused, Julie, on playing for their team and cementing a playoff position and then going forward from there.
Let's dive into this Team Canada roster because that's what people want to hear. We've got question marks in goal and two elder statesmen not named to the team, John Tavares and Steven Stamkos. Yep. Let's start with that. Are you surprised that those guys, just because of their time served, didn't get a spot?
Steven just can't catch a break when it comes to international competition. He just can't, whether it's injuries or, just bad luck. It's just unbelievable. I feel so badly for Steven. And Steven would probably be the first person, Dan and Julie, to say this. He hasn't had a great start to the year. And neither have the Nashville Predators. So it's not just Steven, it's the entire team. So I don't have a problem with that. JT, on the other hand, I think he's just been magnificent all season long. Again, last night against Nashville, I thought Johnny was fantastic in so many different situations. But again, I just see that the way the roster's made up, I just don't see where he would fit on this roster, to be fair. But they're both very, very important names for Hockey Canada and the lore of Hockey Canada.
I think like that's such a great point about Stamkos, though, and also the fact that John Cooper's the head coach and they have that long relationship with Tampa, and then we know about Stamkos. It's like just you feel as though maybe you just bring him along as like a mascot in a way. Like he would be so excited to be there. Like he almost deserves it in a way. It's just like a sub. I was a sub a lot of times, and I was just a mascot on the team. And you're a good person in the room.
Well, it's a great story because Julie's not far wrong on this, Dan. I don't know if you're in Grand Forks with us or not, Dan, for the World Junior in 05.
I wasn't allowed to leave the studio, so no.
But there was a really good kid growing up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, who ended up being the stick boy for Team Canada for a little part of that event. His name's Jonathan Taves. And the next year, Jonathan Taves wore number 19 in Vancouver as an underage player at the World Junior. And that was the shocking World Junior in 2006 where Canada won. And JT, Jonathan Taves, different than John Tavares, played a major role in that. But his experience the year before in Grand Forks was amazing. And he was a little part of it, not a huge part of it, but he saw whether it was Ryan Getzlaf, Sidney Crosby, Patrice Bergeron, Corey Perry, Mike Richards. It was a murderer's row of players. And the reason why it was is because there was an NHL lockout. And nobody was playing. It was the winter of the nuclear winter with no NHL. So John was there. So just to Julie's point about, having a mascot, it's not always a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's not always a bad, and maybe
I know there's like not a lot of spots on the team, but like if you were to give a guy sort of like an extra shot, like a guy that deserves it, I just feel like Stamkos has just been, as you said, can't catch a break.
He just couldn't catch a break internationally. I feel so bad for him, but he's got the Stanley Cup pedigree, and that never goes away. Never goes away.
Canada up front stacked. They could put two teams out there. Any surprises in the forward selections?
There are three that stand out to me. One is Adam Lowry, and people are like, McGuire, shut up. You don't know what time. Yeah, Adam Lowry, because it's on small ice. Penalty killing is going to be a factor. Physical intimidation is going to be a factor, and he's unbelievable when it comes to face-off play and penalty kill. So that's one. I'm not saying he should be on there, but I hope he got some recognition and some thought going in. Tommy Wilson of the Washington Capitals.
Yeah.
Can play with first-line players, can play with fourth-line players. He's a better penalty killer than people know, and he can skate for a big guy. And he's having a real good year so far in Washington. A big part of why they're doing well is Tommy. And then the third one, and I think this one is probably debated heavily in Canada, is Mark Scheifele. Mark's been, amazing. And he's better, if you look at it, if you look at Mark Scheifele's whole body of work since he came in the league out of the Barrie Colts, he's almost a point-a-game player in the NHL. And when you're a point-a-game player pace for your whole career, that's a really good player. That's a really, really good player.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, too, about guys like a Tom Wilson or something, because they're not the same as these other sort of like superstars we have up front. And I mean, I know that you're trying to pick the best. It seems as though it's difficult. You want to pick like the best players to go, but you need guys for different situations. I mean, do they have enough like variety, Canada, and especially in their forward group for variety of situations?
I think they do. I'll give you an example. Like energy won't be a problem. Anthony Cirelli is an unbelievable energy player. Brandon Hagel's an amazing energy player. Seth Jarvis is way undervalued. I think if he plays in any other market than Carolina, especially for Canadian fans, people would recognize how good he is. I think Travis Konechny, people are probably saying, we got a bunch of Travis Konechnys. No, you don't. Travis Konechny, the last 2 seasons, 30-plus goals, and he's on his way to probably a 40-goal year this year. Travis Konechny playing with elite players is going to be huge for them. So I like the Canadian roster. I do. I think the Canadian roster up front's really good. And I love the addition of Sam Bennett. Like, he's just a nasty piece of business.
Yeah.
He just is. He's a nasty piece of business. And I think in a lot of international events, intimidation physically doesn't matter. I think in this event, physical intimidation is going to matter. And he's not a shrinking violet. He'll bring physical intimidation.
On the back line, no Evan Bouchard. Did that surprise you?
No, because I think, and I don't mean any disrespect to Evan at all, but I think Josh Morrissey is probably the most underappreciated defenseman in the NHL. Dan, I really do. If you watch, he's just so good and so efficient. Dan, he can skate, he can move the puck, he can run a power play, he can kill penalties. He's a great matchup defender. I don't think he gets enough love. And the other one is, and Julie, I think you'll
Wait,
appreciate-
before you switch, I gotta show you. I have Josh Morrissey's stick.
That's why Julie's on the show, Dan. She's good at what
Yeah.
she does.
That's why I'm on the show. It's a left-handed stick and it's signed. So I'm learning how to be Josh Morrissey. So no, he is incredible.
And I would say that
Prince
the other-
Albert Raider.
Hey, Dano, prior preparation prevents potential problems, and Julie just proved that. Having that stick there when I said Josh Morrissey, that's really good stuff.
I had that ready, for this particular
She was ready.
conversation.
But I think a lot of people out there are probably saying, Travis Sanheim, really? Travis Sanheim's a big guy. He's almost 6'6". He can absolutely wheel for a big guy. And I think playing for John Tortorella the last couple of years and Brad Shaw has made him a tremendously marketable player in an international event. I don't have any flaw or fault with anything they've done building this team.
Okay, one of my props behind me is a picture of Grant Fuhr, who, sorry, that's
They
really
could
good,
use
just
him.
coming through the shut there, who was a goalie for Canada in the Canada Cup. The question marks, that's the biggest one we have, is in goal for Team Canada. Mm-hmm. Can you ease people's minds? We don't have a Grant Fuhr. We don't have a Carey Price. But we do have Binnington.
But we do have who? Chicks list. Sam Montembeau.
Sam Montembeau. Aiden Hill.
So you know what I think Team Canada should do for the fans? Build a tape of the 2019 Stanley Cup Final and go just to Game 7 in the first period. If Jordan Binnington's not playing for the St. Louis Blues, they don't just lose that Game 7, they get pulverized. I did the game, and I'm telling you right now, the Bruins shellacked them, except on the scoreboard, and that was because of Jordan Binnington. I think if there's one guy that'll be comfortable playing in this environment, because he is definitely comfortable in his own skin, it's Jordan Binnington. He's very, very
Is he ever?
comfortable in his own skin.
Do you get worried that he might get a little too fired up at certain circumstances?
I think that's where the Crosby effect kicks in, Julie. I really do. I think the older guys that have been around, Alex Pietrangelo, and Alex was with him in St. Louis. He knows him, and Colton Parayko was too. They know how to bring him down, and I think that's part of this. If you're going to win an event like this, you got to get better every day, but you also have to be able to hit the ground running. I think the sense of familiarity with this roster allows them to have a chance to hit the ground running pretty quick.
It is unique. And I have, Dan, sorry, I know you're going to open your
go ahead.
I got another prop up here.
Oh, you got
This is-
Mr. Dress Up Tickle Trunk there, just pulling things out.
This is a guy that's not on the team, and he wasn't on the notable omissions list. How do you think Morgan Riley feels?
Probably overlooked.
I do like Morgan Riley.
I do too. So here, remember we talked about sense of familiarity. So Makar and Taves, it can be argued, maybe the best partnership in the league. So that's one of those. Parayko and Pietrangelo, they won the Stanley Cup together. So there's a sense there. Pietrangelo and Shea Theodore, they won the Stanley Cup together.
Yeah.
So now we're down to one player. Josh Morrissey should be on this team. No disrespect meant to anybody else. So now we're down to one player, Travis Sanheim. He does stuff that Morgan doesn't do. You know what I mean? He's
like
big.
what?
He's big, man. He's 6 foot. He's a big guy. Morgan's not that big. And they already got enough guys that can skate and wheel the puck. They need some shutdown capability and shot blocking capability. And that's what I think Travis brings a little bit more than Morgan.
There are two other teams in this tournament, and they are going
whatever they are, okay.
Sweden and Finland, and they are going to show their players every podcast, every show, exactly what we're doing, and tell their guys, no one's talking about you guys. No one's talking about you guys.
They're going to specifically show Toronto Sports Rush, being
yes,
look, they didn't even mention you in the tournament until, 25 minutes in?
And then they can say, you guys can play spoiler. You've got nothing. They literally have nothing to lose. So why don't we look at Sweden and Finland? Obviously, they have a shot. They're stacked teams. We'll start with Sweden.
First of all, let's go to the 2006 Winter Olympics in Italy, in Torino. The gold medal game was between Finland and Sweden. and it basically got decided because of a broken stick face-off in the neutral zone to start the third period. And the Swedes ended up scoring, and Henrik Lundqvist did the rest, and the Swedes beat the Finns in the gold medal game. There's no reason why it couldn't happen again in this event, because they're two unbelievably proud hockey countries. I've spent a lot of parts of my older life in both of those countries, evaluating players and coaches and different systems. So I know both countries really well. The Swedes are now the country of choice when it comes to amazingly big athletic defensemen. And their defense speaks to that, the way they've built their team. So I think that's going to be a problem for whomever plays against them. I don't know if they're going to have enough offensive firepower to overcome Team USA or to overcome Team Canada. I do think they'll have more than enough offensive firepower to stay ahead of Finland. So that's going to be their little question mark, is going to be how much scoring are they going to get from all four lines. For the Finns, anybody, and you can ask any player in this tournament that's played against the Finns, if you underestimate their work habits, their professional pride, and their pride on wearing their country's sweater, you will lose to them every time. You will lose to them every single time. They are as proud a hockey country as any country I know.
I love
Remember, we saw Finland beat Russia in Sochi, all three of us.
Correctamundo. You are correct.
And that was pretty intense too. Did they beat USA as well?
They did. USA did not
bronze.
play. Yeah, they did. They beat the Americans.
Yeah, that was.
You know what's amazing about that? Team. What I remember about that tournament with the Finns more than anything else, Mikael Granlund was playing for Minnesota, and Teemu Selanne was obviously at the end of his career. And Teemu and Mikael, it must have been something the Finns wanted. I remember Teemu just trying to mentor Mikael Granlund the whole time. And it was amazing to see the professional pride that Teemu had in working with Granlund. It really was. And now I see the list, and Granlund's still playing for Team Finland. And you wonder, how much mentorship will he be providing for some of the younger Finns? My biggest question for Finland, will Patrick Laine make a difference? Will he make a difference offensively?
How about Laine scoring in Montreal the other night? And I saw a quote from him. He said it was something he'd never seen in his life. Ovation that he got.
Yeah, I watched the entire game, and I thought he was tremendous. He said he didn't feel great and his legs weren't very good. Well, you'd have a hard time seeing that from watching him play. His skill level with the puck was phenomenal. But having grown up in Montreal and be proud to say that, that doesn't surprise me. The crowd there is amazing. It always has been and always will be. The crowd's pretty amazing.
And that song, the goal song they play, what's it called?
I have no idea what it's called.
Like a French song?
Yeah, but I don't know what it's called.
I don't know.
I always bring this up here. The greatest ovation I've ever seen was for Rocket Richard at the closing of the Forum, and I think it's close to a 20-minute standing ovation. I go back and watch that once a year, and I cry because he's telling the crowd enough. They get louder. They get louder.
That was a really good one. And I was coaching in Ottawa when that happened. So we were actually in our office. We were playing that night, and I was watching that celebration. I'm going, wow, that's pretty amazing. The applause from Mr. Beliveau when he was near the end and he would wave to the crowd was huge. But I was at one working, I think, for you at TSN for sure, when Saku Koivu came back from cancer.
Oh, yes.
Oh, man, yeah.
Like you talk about tears coming to your eyes. I've been fortunate to know Saku since he was a young kid in Turku, Finland. And to see that moment, that was really emotional. That was unbelievable. It was uplifting. It truly was. It was amazing. And the crowd was crazy good. Crazy.
Oh, I'm going to watch that on YouTube today. Put that on the check marks.
Yeah, get it in my feels today on that. But I want to ask you just one other thing about Sweden. When you see the roster come out and you see seeing a Jesper Bratt and Mika Zibanejad and William Nylander, and I think those guys, Mika's he's got the yips right now, but seeing those guys being able to play together, do you think that maybe the offense could be slightly underrated?
It could be. Mika's obviously been underwhelming this year, and I think he'd be the first person to tell you that. Jesper Bratt is phenomenal. I'm so glad you brought his name up. You see him and Jack Hughes play together the other night in New York against the Rangers. And Julie, you're down there. You get to see them all the time. It's pretty impressive. They do have some underrated defense or offense, excuse me. But where I think the real strength of their team, Julie, is going to be on defense. They're athletic, they're big, they're mobile, and they can all pass the puck tape to tape. And they're not going to be intimidated by physical forecheck. Talking about the Swedes, they won't be intimidated by that at all.
You know who I love seeing on that roster? Erik Karlsson. After what he's gone through with that Achilles injury, thought his career was over, and now he's back playing for his country.
You know what's amazing? I remember Erik playing in Sochi, and Julie, you were there, Dano, you were there, and he was playing on the left side and the right side for the Swedes. What I remember, that was right after his injury situation, and you could see he didn't have the extra gear he used to have, but man, he still influenced the outcome of games. He was really good. He was really good.
Has anyone checked on Sochi and those hotels? Has anyone visited Sochi since the Olympics?
All I know is there's a Formula One race that they have there, and that's, I think, the only thing they got going on there. Well, they still have the team in the KHL, the Sochi team still in the KHL, but I don't know if they stay at those hotels anymore. I have no idea.
Well, they had that roller coaster that was like almost built.
It was a half-built roller coaster.
Vividly remember that. You at least stayed in a hotel, Pierre. Dan and I were in a frat house.
Yeah, it was. It was memorable, though. I wouldn't change it for the world. You know what I love about this tournament? The more I think about it, because what was that last thing the NHL did? It was they had like a no-name team. It was like the Young Guns. North America. So this event, guys will be playing with pride. There's going to be money put on the line, and these guys have bragging rights for the rest of their career if they win it. They're not, you know what hockey players are like. You know what anyone who plays sports is like. They're competitive. It doesn't matter if it's a road hockey game. It doesn't matter what it is. So
like a game of cards, they're competitive.
Yeah, they are.
There's going to be a lot on the line here.
Oh, I think so. Plus, I can tell you right now, the Finns are really in it to win it. Like, they care. They don't like people kicking dirt on them. And the Swedes are the same when it comes to hockey. For both those countries, those are massive sports for them. The Americans are going to want to prove a point because it's on small ice. And the Canadians, obviously, half the tournaments in Montreal, half the tournaments in Boston. They want to show, hey, we're the bosses going into Italy next year in 2026, I should say. So, yeah, I think there's a lot on the line. The one thing I love about Best on Best, and basically this is Best on Best without the Russians and the Czechs and the Germans being there, but this is really Best on Best, the best we can do right now, no pun intended, is that guys do go to another level. Like, I expect Connor McDavid to go to another level. I expect Nathan McKinnon to go to another level. And the leadership of Sid in particular, I think Sidney's just going to do a masterful job leading this team. I really do.
I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't wait.
I know. We can't wait. As we started the podcast off, you said, another
I wanted to despise this event. I wanted to be so angry by it, but I can't be.
You're like, no, because some of these guys have played together, but like Team North America. I have a hat of Team North America. It was so strange.
Julie, are you setting up a road trip so we're in Montreal together as a group and then down to Boston?
Obviously, I feel as though it would be remiss for us not to be like in Montreal and then Boston.
Yeah,
I think, and that's an easy via rail ride. I don't know what, a plane ride, something.
I'll volunteer to
Easy and via rail don't go together.
No, you're right. We'll take Pierre's helicopter from Mount Tremblant down through these ways. Pierre, who do you think's going to win this tournament?
I think Canada will win. I do.
Yeah, baby.
I do.
Yeah, Canada.
I think Canada will win. Doesn't mean that we won't have a surprise in the event, though, because I do think we'll have a surprise in the event. I'm not just going to play out exactly like the organizers are hoping, but I do think Canada will win.
How much you hope for a Canada-USA final?
That would be massive. I obviously one of the better moments I think in my career was to watch Canada-USA in 2010 and have an amazing seat for that.
The best.
One of the big stories that comes out of that, remember when Ronnie Wilson was coaching Team USA and saw him at the airport the next day, and I said, hey, Coach, your team did an unbelievable job getting back into that gold medal game. He looked right at me and he goes, Petey, we had nothing left in the tank. Our goal was to get it to overtime, and he could tell, he told me this, he said, I could tell in the dressing room, our guys left it all out there. We had nothing left to give. So if we didn't score early in overtime, we weren't winning. And it's amazing how a coach could get that feel from his team. So I think, you think about the ratings for that. 26 million Canadians watched that gold medal game. 26 million. They've never had another TV event anything close to that. Not even close.
Shots of the 401 during the game, and it was empty.
Yeah.
I think it was like, it has to be like so many, if not all of our favorite sort of sports memories as a Canadian hockey fan. I was watching it from London, England at the time, waited 8 hours to go to like the Canadian bar there. Yeah. And I remember thinking, now being in the US, telling everyone, they go, oh, what's your favorite memory as a sports fan? I'm like, when Canada won in 2010. And then they hate me, of course, because they were on the other side of it. So it was, and even looking at the Olympics this year, I remember hearing our numbers, like I worked at CBC, numbers for like the highest rated games, and this is, of course, the Summer Olympics, was like 2 million.
Yeah.
And that puts it into perspective of like that game versus say the 100-meter sprint or something.
I've had the privilege of doing so many big things, whether it's 8 Olympics or doing Stanley Cup finals and all. That's the one game that stands out of all the big ones. You have the privilege, and coaching in a ton of big games too. That's the one game that I will always remember, and almost every moment of that game I can remember. It was spectacular. The Canadian fans in Vancouver were amazing, and when it was over, the celebration coast to coast in Canada was crazy. It was awesome.
I was in attendance for the gold medal game in Russia. I don't remember a single thing about it.
I was also there, Dan.
Yeah, I know. Canada won gold.
You were sitting down in the sweet seats, you, Jay, and Peter Schrager. I remember because I had my binoculars looking at you from.
We landed those. I don't know how.
You didn't come by and say hello. I was between the benches. Would have been nice to see all of you.
They wouldn't have allowed us.
We had a trouble even just getting into the arena, because you know how getting in with all the security gates.
Yes,
we barely got in.
Can I give you one quick story from that Olympics? If you remember the TJ Oshie shootout?
Of course.
And so I was doing that game with Eddie Olchuk and Doc Emmerich on NBC, and as soon as it was clinched and Oshie finished it off, I turned around and Mr. Putin was there with his supporters, and I saw these guns come up.
Oh boy.
And I went on the talk back and I said, I'm not kidding around with you guys, but they're like armed guards right behind me. And I just want you to know that. And they said, don't worry about it. It's just for safety for Mr. Putin, and everything will be fine. And he walked out. There was no issues. But that's the one thing I remember turning around. I'm like, oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah, you don't see that every day, turning around after you've called a hockey game.
No.
Well, I also remember Putin was on his best behavior. Then the day after the Olympics ended, they started a war.
Yeah, well,
right. Yeah.
We were actually on a plane leaving for NBC. We were leaving Sochi, flying to New York, and the Secret Service people that were like the security guard for the NBC people, they actually told us that was going to happen. They knew that as soon as we left and everybody left, that was going on. They told
and the welcome mat was rolled up, because I went with Jay and Peter Schrager and Robert Lucetich. We went to this restaurant the day after the Olympics ended, and we were having lunch, and we were getting daggers.
Was it at the Radisson Blue? Did you go to the Radisson
No,
Blue?
we wandered off.
We snuck in there to go work out.
Oh, did you?
We wandered off.
Yeah.
And the locals, they wanted us out of their country. We were like, okay, it's time to go home now.
Yeah.
What an odd time. But that was one of our last memories of international hockey. So that's why
we're bringing it up.
10 years ago, which is pretty crazy. So great to have it fired back up. And Pierre, thank you for joining us. Dan, I think we're done. I think we're done here.
Yeah, that's a good sign up, Binksy.
I don't know if you want to have any more questions or not. We know Canada's
I'm done.
I'm
done.
I'm
ready.
I'm excited.
I'm ready for the Four Nations face-off. Horrible name. Should be a good event.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.